Welcome to Where Parents Talk. I'm Lianne Castelino. Our guest today is a father of two and a Hall of Fame quarterback who spent 20 seasons in the Canadian Football League and remains a league record holder in multiple categories. Anthony Calvillo led the Montreal Alouettes to three Grey Cup championships over 16 seasons with the team. He is currently assistant coach with the University of Montreal's football team, the Carabins. Anthony Calvillo joins us from Montreal. It's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lianne. It's been a while.
It has been, and I wanted to ask you first of all about the pandemic. Parenting during this time has certainly, gained a lot of traction as a subject matter for a whole bunch of reasons. But I wonder how your family has coped and what has struck you about what you've learned about your family during this extraordinary time.
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's gotten us closer. To be honest with you, we've spent so much time together, inside our house and just amongst ourselves. Normally, we would spend a lot of time with our other family members, but of course, we've been forced to kind of just stay within your own little bubble the most time that you can, and it's been great. We've always had family dinners together, and we've always had great conversations, but now it's been multiplied by tenfold. So, the dinner conversations have been great. Right now, the biggest thing is we talk about traveling, right? We that's one of our things that we love to do. And the girls just can't wait to go back and travel and just to be together. So I think that at the end of the day, it's definitely brought us closer just because we spent so much more time together.
On that note, what would you say has struck you most about the current phase of parenting that you're in, specifically parenting two teenage daughters in this current time that we're living in?
Well, I think the biggest thing that concerned us is just to make sure that the kids are getting what they needed, spending time with their friends. So yes, they are able to go to school, but then when they come home, they're not able to spend a lot of time with them. So there was a balance between how much time we were going to allow them on their iPad to not only do homework, but to spend time with their friends. Because the only time they could spend time with their friends, of course, is at school or spending time online like we're doing on right now. So I think that's been the biggest challenge, is to make sure that they're not overdoing it. But at the same time, as a parent, we have to understand, well, they got to be able to spend some time with their friends as well. And the only time they could do it right now is online. So both girls have been great. They've had some outings with their friends, going for walks and stuff like that. But I think the biggest thing is just to make sure that that mentally they're doing okay, because this stuff that we're all going through, that includes the parents, is not normal. So we're constantly talking to them to make sure that they feel comfortable what's going on right now. And whenever there's a new rule that comes up, or if the school is shut down for a little while because of there's a case, that we're communicating to, just to make sure that mentally they're doing okay.
Outside of the pandemic, parenting teenage girls in 2021 has a whole sort of list of unique challenges and unique things that you experience as a parent. Anything there strike you in terms of where you are on that journey?
Yeah, so both our girls right now, Athena, she'll be 16 in July, and Olivia, of course, is going to be 14 there in October. So for us right now, a lot of the stuff has been canceled. All these dances and events. The kids wanted to join a lot of sports. They weren't able to do that. So we're trying to keep them as busy as we can here at home. So for us, in terms of as things changed, things have changed for us, but we're trying to make sure that they're mentally strong. But nothing's come up in terms of okay, Daddy, I want to go do this or do that. My other friends are the same age as me, and they're able to go out at this time. But unfortunately, right now, here in Quebec, we're on a curfew and a lockdown after 9:30 or 8 o'clock at one point. So there wasn't a whole lot that they could do in terms of that aspect. But I think as a parent, we're trying to be as open-minded as we can, because, like I said before, Lianne, it's the mental aspect of it. We want to make sure that they are one, developing the way they're supposed to develop as young women, and that's also spending time with their friends and doing things outside of the household, right? I mean, I love my house, but I also want to get out and do some other stuff with other people as well. So there's just a balance that we're trying to do right now, but for the most part, it's been very good.
I'm glad to hear that. How would you go about, Anthony, describing your personal parenting style?
Well, my personal parenting style is basically it's a team event between my wife and myself. We're always constantly talking about how we grew up and the things that we were able to do, and it's quite different, right? Like we just had the conversation the other day with our kids, like we didn't have a timeout mats. Our parents would spank us, right? That's how it was back in the day in terms of our discipline. And we try to tell our girls, like, listen, I can't imagine doing that to you guys now, but we also got to be able to communicate and be able to discipline when we need to discipline. So things have definitely changed how we were brought up. But I want to make sure that our girls understand that we do love them, that the things that we're doing for them in terms of what they can and cannot do is for their best interest. We're always talking about, making sure that they feel protected and to be aware of their surroundings. When they go out, we tell them, listen, we know everything's fine, but you must be aware of your surroundings, what's going on around you, because you just never know what's going to happen out there. So we're not there to scare our girls, but we are there to let them know that to be aware of what's going on around them and to be very careful online, because there's a lot of people online right now that that could take advantage of young girls. So we're always trying to talk to them, like, be careful who you're talking to and what you're doing online, and that's very important for us.
Now, with respect to your childhood that you just referred to there, you grew up with brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, what did you do, if anything, to learn how to raise girls?
Well, you're right. Like I had two brothers and a sister, and I do remember my mom talking about, because there was three boys first, and then she had the daughter, and she was like, "What do I do? Like, how is this going to be different?" Because we had the three boys beforehand. So I think just overall, as a parent, for myself, whether I had a boy or a girl, I wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable, that they felt loved, and that they felt protected, right? So, I have two nephews who my girls grew up with. They're almost the same age. And I could tell you this, when they were over, my girls acted a lot differently, because they would kind of just, we'd be at the dinner table, they're having fun, they're kind of hitting each other. And then my girls start hitting each other. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And that was the big difference between, just based off of my experience, between boys and girls. It's just there's a physical aspect of, okay, let's have some fun with it. The girls were, they wouldn't do that when they were by themselves. But I think the biggest thing for us, me and my wife Alexia, we just make sure that we communicate and what we feel is best for our girls. And the one thing we tell our girls too is, if we allow you to do something or not do something, just know that it's in your best interest. And another family might think the opposite, but it's what's important for us and how we raise you. And not to say that somebody else is doing it the wrong way, but for us, this is what we allow you to do and what we don't allow you to do. And we explain to them why. If we don't want them to do something, we explain that to them. So we just want to make sure that we're looking out for their best interests, but everybody's household is going to be different.
Well, and it's a very important point you bring up, because a lot of kids and a lot of parents get trapped in that comparison issue. And then once you go down that road, it's really hard to sort of, bring it back and say, we're not really concerned about what everyone else is doing. We're concerned about what you're doing. So, it's interesting to hear you say that. And I guess that's the way it's always been for you, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's just the thing, because we want to make sure that we are communicating with them, and we tell them, why we don't want them to do that. And they would bring up, well, so-and-so's parents allow them to do this. I'm like, well, everybody's different in what they believe in and what they want their kids to do. And for us in our households, this is why we want you to do this. So It's been very important. But I think the dialogue that we have with our kids has been great as well, because, if they have a concern about something, they would ask us, and then we would give them the explanation. We wouldn't just say, well, that's just the way we did it, so that's the way we're teaching you. It's no, this is the reason why. And this way they have a better understanding of why they can or cannot do something.
You became a father in your 30s while you were still setting CFL records. And you continue on that journey. And I'm wondering, what has being a dad brought to your life that you were not expecting?
Well, I remember people always talk about, like, people who had kids, they would say, man, when you have kids, everything changes. And they would always say, as much as we could tell you it's going to change, you won't know until you experience it when you actually have your first child. And I didn't understand that until I had Athena. And I remember holding her in the hospital and thinking, my goodness, now I am responsible for this human being, right? And I got to do my best to raise her the best that I can. And to me, that was going to be very important. And yes, we had children later on, so we were a little bit more, let's say, established financially at that particular point for us. But I think the biggest thing just for me is looking back how I grew up. The things that I saw in terms of domestic violence that I grew up in my household, that I knew that was something that I did not want that for my family or for my girls. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that I was going to raise them properly, and make sure that they felt loved, and be able to communicate with me, and show them how a man should treat a woman. And that was important, because as a father, I really feel that I set the example for what our girls are going to look for later on in life. And that's constantly in the back of my mind. And my wife, brings that up as well, because sometimes I could be joking around with her. She's like, hey, be careful what we're saying, because the girl's going to think that that's okay. Not that it's bad, but I just want to make sure that they understand how a man should treat a woman.
It's such an important message, obviously, and I wonder, for people who are listening or watching this interview who might not be familiar with your whole story in terms of your childhood, how would you go about summarizing your childhood experience?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, my father was an alcoholic. He was physically abusive to my mother, which we call domestic violence, and we grew up that way. So, and everything kind of stopped or ended when I was around 12 years old, when my older brother David kind of put a stop to it, where he stepped in front of my dad and said, enough's enough. And then my father was no longer around. So for us to experience that, that was our life. So to me, I always wondered, is this normal? Is it normal for a father to be physically harming their mother? Is this what happens in everybody's family? And of course, as I got older, I realized that that's not normal whatsoever. But I had, even though I didn't have that example of a great father, I knew deep in my heart and in my soul that that's something that I did not want for my family. But I had certain people who helped me out, like my high school coach, my college coach, Jim Zorn, who was my university coach at Utah State, really kind of opened up my mind, because he would invite me and the other quarterbacks to his house, and I would see his interaction with his wife and his kids, and he knew what my background was all about, and he's like, Anthony, he goes, just because you experience something, that doesn't mean you got to go through it as well, or put your family through it. You have the choice to make a change in your family. So that always resonated with me, and that's something that was always close to my heart, that I wanted to do the best that I could for my wife and my kids, and break this cycle of alcoholism and being physically abusive with your wife. So it was very important for me that I, like I said, set the proper example that I feel for my girls.
It's interesting because you talk about having those mentors around you, but it still takes a certain level of strength of character to rise above it and just be determined not to follow the same path. And in your case, not just rise above it, but get to the elite level that you did, which is extraordinary. So I'm wondering, what would be your message for other children or other families who might be in a similar situation right now about how they can flag the situation or this behavior? What steps would you suggest that they take, having lived it yourself?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to understand that it's not normal. And I think growing up for myself, it was like, do I say something or do I not say something? And we didn't. And I don't remember specifically if my mom or my dad said, listen, you do not say anything about this. This stays in house. It was just, I think, assumed. So I just kept all that in me, and hoping that one day that somebody would come and help us, right? And of course, it was my brother who did that. So I think it's important to talk about this with somebody that you trust, to let somebody know what's going on, and then seek help from there. Hopefully there's somebody, whether it's a family member, a church, somebody from your church, or a teacher, or somebody that you confide in, and let them know. And then after that, I think the biggest challenge, I think, for myself was to find other examples of what a father should be or what a husband could be. And I was able to experience that by just talking to somebody else and seeing their experience as well. So, that's one way of doing it. But the biggest thing is just try to see if you could kind of get some help somewhere.
Definitely. Now, you chose to keep this part of your story about your childhood private for many years, until your 40s. And I'm wondering, what has been the impact on you and your family of coming out with this, 8 or 9 years ago, that impact since then?
Well, I think the biggest thing just for our family, my brothers, my mom, is we were finally able to talk about it out loud, right? So, like you mentioned, it was a family secret for many years. The CFL did a documentary on my life in 2011, and that's where this information came out. So, we were able to share our thoughts and feelings, and it was very emotional. And the reason why we kept it a secret, because we just didn't want my mom to relive it all over again, but she felt very comfortable talking about it going forward in the documentary. And the biggest thing personally is we were able to talk about it, share our feelings. My brother David, myself, and my mom. My younger brother doesn't have much of a recollection of what happened, and my sister was too young for it as well. But just for us, we were able to talk about it. And I think the biggest message was two things. One is we were able to share our feelings of how it affected us. And then two, to give an example to other people who might be going through this right now, and letting them know, like, hey, maybe if I saw this, or if I'm an abuser, there are people out there who went through it and they didn't fall into that same cycle, or there are people who did but found a way out of it by making the conscious decision to find help. And that's all that we were trying to do, is share our experience, and hopefully it could touch somebody's life out there where they could make a positive change in their life.
Now, having been around young men, high performance athletes, locker rooms, almost your entire professional career, what observations, if any, have you made about the culture therein? And sort of, how do you go about, I don't know, do you go about trying to intervene or make an impact on things that you might see or hear in that environment?
Um, for me, I think I've always been a type of personal leader where you kind of just lead by example, right? So I think that's very important. If you're, for myself as a quarterback, being in that position, what comes out of my mouth, how I conduct myself, people are going to look at that and say, okay, that's something that I could do, whether it's good or bad. So for myself, I knew that I wanted to make sure that I set the proper example. And I always think about my girls, right? Making sure that I'm doing the right thing for them. But if we're in a locker room set and a conversation comes up, it wasn't a conscious thing where I thought about, okay, I have to make sure that I am saying or doing this. It was just, I was just doing what I would normally do. I respected my values and what I believed in, and I had to just set the example from there. But there, there were like, I remember with Mark Trestman when he was our coach, like in our locker room, there was no music that could have the N word in it. There was no music that could be degrading to women. He didn't want any of that in our locker room whatsoever. So, he was setting the example for a lot of guys that, listen, what you guys listen to, what you guys hear, it's important for me that that's not in the locker room, because I don't want to promote that or allow you, not to allow you guys to hear it, but it was important to him in that locker room that was respected, and that resonated in me. So, those are those little things where he was setting the example as a leader that this is something that's important to me, and I want to share that with you guys.
It's interesting because, in the time that you've been a dad and also been part of these different sort of professional locker rooms and amateur athletes and that kind of thing, have you ever been tempted to offer your thought even as you are leading by example? Because sometimes it's right in your face. I mean, I'm just going to assume that it is. And so, the temptation to kind of let it slide and hope that that person gets the message from something that you're doing further down the line, it may not happen. So do you ever find yourself in that kind of position?
Not that I can recall off the top of my head right now. If there was
That's a good
something
thing.
where it was something that I heard or that I saw and said, man, that's just not right, guys. You gotta think about what you're doing. I can't recall that off the top of my head, but I can recall. I remember many years ago, I was working out in the gym, and I must have been 21, 22. And I remember seeing a gentleman arguing with a lady, and he was being, kind of on her arm and pulling her, and you could tell they were having an argument. And I was kind of stuck, like, what do I do here? And this guy was a big guy, right? Do I step in? Do I call the cops? Do I inform the security there? And then after like 10 seconds, then they just stopped. He didn't hit her, do anything like that. But that was an opportunity that I reflect back that, should I have stepped in and be like, hey, you shouldn't treat something like that. But to be honest with you, I was nervous. I was scared, even though I experienced that. This was he was a large individual. So I wish when you think back, and I wish, maybe I could inform the people at the gym, like just security, like, hey, this is what I saw. But that was the only time where I can reflect where I saw something like that. And like I said, it didn't last long, but I didn't step in right away, right, and say, listen, you got to stop it, this is not right. Where now I could tell you, I would hope that I would step in and say something, and hopefully that I don't have to experience something like that where I have to do that. But now that people are talking about domestic violence and there's a lot of discussion about it, that I or people out there won't shy away from it.
Anybody who's followed your career, Anthony, knows you that you are a deeply committed professional. Family is obviously very important. It has been for you since day one. But you're also, a private and reserved individual. So I wonder, with talking about your childhood all those years ago, and now speaking out recently about domestic violence as it relates to the pandemic, and those numbers, quite high in many parts of the world and in many cities, including the province of Quebec. Like, why is it important for you to speak up on this topic as a private person with such a public persona?
Well, I think there's, like you mentioned, I'm pretty private. I keep to myself, but there's certain topics that are important where you feel that you have to lend your voice to this, like I mentioned earlier. So I believe up to date, there's been 10 women that they believe who have died to domestic violence right now here in Quebec. And there's a lot of discussions, a lot of programs that are now popping up, and a lot of money that's been put in place now to help those. So again, I just wanted to share my personal experience on what I went through, and how I was able to overcome it. Because at the end of the day, the more I believe the more people who have gone through this and talked about their experience could help someone down the road, whether it's a young man who's going through it, a young kid who's going through it, a wife who's going through it now might have the courage to say enough's enough. And that's what it's all about. And I know that it had a major impact on my life, and I wish that people would have been talking about it, and there would have been other programs when I was younger, but from what I can recall, there wasn't. So now it's, to me, I just think it's something that touches my heart, and I just wanted to share what I went through and how I was able to overcome it. Not just me, but my brothers and family as well.
Where would you like to see the conversation around this, the societal conversation around this, get to? And how far do you think we are from there? Because ultimately, part of this has to do with how we're raising boys and how we're raising girls, which you know talked about in your own personal experience. But where would you like to see this conversation ultimately go?
Well, I think you just talked about something very important. Is like each family is going to raise their kids the way they feel is important for them, right? They're always going to set the example, the parents going forward. But I think right now, the conversation that we're having about domestic violence, yes, we're talking about the women having shelters, and I've always stressed that, I talk about it, but I don't have boots on the ground. Like there's organizations here in our city right now, in every city, that the government should be talking to say, okay, what do you need? And I think that conversation's been going on right now to help these families, and there's also talk and funding to help the individuals who are actually the abuser, who are who might be looking for help as well. And I think there's programs out there for them as well. So I like the direction where it's going, but I think the key right now is to talk to these organizations who are dealing with the people every day. I think that's where the information needs to be at, and hopefully down the road, in 6 months' time, they could say things have improved. But I think in anything that you're trying to improve, that you're always want to take it one step further. So I just hope we're further advanced now, or in 6 months than we are now.
When you see where we are and you think about your childhood, I wonder, and also about the coaches and people that sort of supported you along the way, how do you look at your mother now, being a parent yourself? And obviously, your kids are in their teens. So, but I'm curious, like, as we journey through life and certainly through parenting, I think we constantly look at our parents and what they did in different ways. So I wonder how you see your mother now.
Well, I always knew that she was very strong, even after my dad left, because she was a stay-at-home mother. There was four of us, but then once my dad was gone, and she had to go and work, so she was working full time and trying to raise four kids at the same time, and that could be very, very challenging. Because I remember she always felt bad because she was always able to attend all of our games because we played sports. All of a sudden, she would start work, and now she can no longer attend all of them because she was too busy trying to support four kids at home. Um, so I got a lot of respect for my mom then, as I do now. Because raising four kids and going what she gone through was very, very difficult and challenging. So there's a lot of respect, like I said then, and of course now as well.
Finally, Anthony, what would you say that you are most proud of as a dad?
What am I most proud of? Well, I think for myself, I think about how I grew up, and I actually, during the pandemic, this documentary that they did on my life, we finally watched it with my girls. We sat down and we shared with them what Daddy went through. So I wanted them to see what I went through, and my brothers, and told them that this is nothing that I wanted for our family, and and we all have choices to make as we grow up, to be the best parent that we can. So I think for me, I'm just proud of the fact that with the support of so many people, my coaches and family and friends over the years, that they were able to help me not only become a football player, but to become a father. And to me, breaking this cycle of alcoholism and domestic violence, that's always going to be on the top of my list of things that I'm proud of.
Anthony Calvillo, thank you so much for your time today. Really
No
appreciate it.
problem. Thank you.